Prepare for a rude awakening. "4,000 years ago, the Creator of the universe made an everlasting covenant with Abraham. All the land, from the Euphrates to the Nile, belongs to the sons of Israel. Shock waves will shake the earth as heaven reaches down to fulfill that promise."
The week of March 26, 2001, a large contingency of rabbinic scholars met at the Western Wall of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and made a singularly significant declaration. The time of Jacob's trouble has now begun. The Hebrew prophets speak at great length about events that will transpire in the latter days. Yirmiyahu prophesied that in the time of Jacob's trouble, the Gentiles shall cry out in remorse for the lies they inherited from their forefathers. Malachi added that in the day of affliction, 10 Gentiles shall take hold of the hem of the garment of a Jew and say, "Let us follow you. We know that God is with you." The world is about to realize that the troubled times ahead are directly related to the hem of this garment. I'm Michael Rood. Prepare for a rude awakening. The Almighty called Abraham to come out of Babylon and cross over the Euphrates River, where his offspring would be given a parcel of land flowing with milk and honey, and a job to do. Abraham's descendants were to purge the land of every last vestige of pagan sun god worship. And then we were to be his priests to the entire earth, a nation of prophets who would make known the ways of the true God and call all nations to return to him. Israel was not obedient to the command to cleanse the land, but instead they adopted the practices of the heathen. For this rebellion, the 10 northern tribes of Israel were blinded and scattered among the heathen that they were emulating, until the time of their punishment would be fulfilled, just as was prophesied by Moses and Ezekiel. The southern tribes in Judea were taken into Babylon because of their disobedience and then scattered by Rome until they became a nation in one day, just as prophesied by Moses, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. That one day occurred May 15, 1948, when the modern state of Israel was born. The precursor to the beginning of the great trials that will come upon the earth is the prophesied return of Israel to their promised homeland. Jeremiah speaks of the day when Yahweh will bring Israel again into the land that he gave unto our fathers. And the Gentiles shall come from the ends of the earth and cry out, "O Lord, you alone are our refuge in the day of affliction. Surely we have inherited from our fathers nothing but lies and vanity." There is a time of trouble approaching that will shake us to our spiritual senses. Theology, the art of explaining the nature of God, will become irrelevant as people are shaken from their materialistic dream world and plunged into the harsh reality that the Hebrew prophets foretold. For those who wake up and cry out in repentance for the lies that they inherited, the God of Israel will perform a miracle that will make the parting of the Red Sea pale by comparison. Zechariah prophesied that in the time of Jacob's troubles, 10 Gentiles will take hold of the hem of the garment of the Jew and say, "Let us follow you. Teach us. We know that Elohim is truly with you." The significance of this garment goes back 3,400 years to the land of Midian, present-day Saudi Arabia. It was there at Mount Sinai, Yahweh instructed that He wanted us to be a nation of priests and rulers. He promised that if we would obey Him, He would give us a parcel of land flowing with milk and honey that stretches from the Nile in Egypt to the great river Euphrates in modern-day Iraq. It is here, in the middle of all the trade routes of the world, we would be positioned as His prophets, His spokesmen to the entire world. As part of the covenant, He instructed us to put a fringe with a ribbon of tallit blue thread on the 4 corners of our garment. This is for us to look on and remember to keep His commandments. This is the blue of the sapphire pavement of the throne room of heaven, and it reminds us that even though we do not see Him, we are always in His presence. When people of the nations take hold of the fringe of our garment and ask its meaning, we are to always to be ready to give an answer to every man that asks a reason of our hope. This one thread of blue is woven into this fringe to appear as 2 threads. I believe that this single blue thread is a picture of the Messiah, our hope, who comes the first time as a suffering servant to complete the sin atonement, and then returns as the conquering reigning king. By tradition, the knots and weaving of the blue thread are a numeric code for Yud, He, Vav, He, Yahweh. Bid the children of Israel to make fringes in the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and have them put a ribbon of tallit upon the fringe, and it shall be for tzitzit, for you to look upon and remember all the commandments of Yahweh, and do them. According to tradition, this color, tallit, comes from the Murex truncalis shellfish. A very small amount of very valuable dye is extracted from this Mediterranean sea snail. When the snail shell is crushed in the sunlight, the ultraviolet rays cause the dye to turn beautiful blue. If the dye is extracted at night, it produces a deep purple. At the end of the Second Temple period, the Roman government controlled the market on this special dye, and it was only to be used to color the royal purple garments of Roman aristocracy. The Jews were forced to obtain the dye on the black market in order to fulfill the commandment of tying a tallit blue fringe on the corners of their tallit. Rabbi Shawl, a Pharisee raised in Jerusalem at the feet of the famous Torah teacher Gamliel, traveled throughout Asia Minor teaching in the synagogues of the dispersed Israelites. He was one of thousands of Jewish followers of Yahshua of Nazareth, and he traversed the continent to share his faith with his Jewish brethren. We read in the English version of the book of Acts that Shaul supported himself by making tents as he traveled from city to city. But tent making is an impossible occupation for a transient teacher. Tents were not the abode of city dwellers among whom Shaul taught, but the habitat of Bedouin shepherds. Tents were made of heavy goat hair, woven on huge wooden looms by the wives of nomadic herdsmen. They would labor for months to produce a huge tent that had to be moved on the back of a camel. Shaul did not make that kind of tent, nor did he make pop-up nylon mountaineering tents with titanium poles. The Greek word for tent is skene, the common translation for the Hebrew word sukkah, which can refer to either a covering as a dwelling or as a tabernacle for worship. To this very day, the tallit is used as a personal tabernacle for worship, just as it was in the days when Shaul traveled among the synagogues of Asia Minor. Sorry for this rude interruption, but what kind of businessman would Shawl be to make tallits, portable private prayer closets, and then instruct the believers not to pray with their heads covered? In Shawl's first letter to the believers in Corinth, we read, "Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. But every woman that prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head." Shawl's statement has no historical or social background in either the Jewish or pagan world, unless we read the statement in context. Shawl just defined his terms in the preceding phrase, "But I want you to know, the head of every man is Messiah, and the head of the woman is her man, and the head of Messiah is God." Shawl is not making a landmark ruling on the use of tallits, cowboy hats, baseball caps, or Easter bonnets while praying. No, he is doing something much more important, stating the proper chain of God-given authority. The Heavenly Father is the head of the Messiah. The Messiah is the head of the man who is the head of the woman. The word "but" indicates that even though Shawl appreciates their imitation of his righteous walk in Messiah, he wants the Corinthians to understand that he is just a servant of the Messiah. He is not the head, and neither is any denominationally appointed authority. A man is not to dishonor his head, the Messiah, by subjugating his authority as the head of his household. The woman is to honor her head, her husband, by relinquishing authority to him as her covering. The man of the house is the highest authority on the planet. He is the high priest of his home, and no apostle, prophet, or pastor has the right to usurp that God-given authority. Ministers are simply servants who are lower in authority than the man of the house. Men, do not dishonor the Messiah, your head, by setting up another authority over you. You are to obey Messiah, whose head is Yahweh, and not religious megalomaniacs. When the smoke clears, you will be judged for your obedience to Yahweh alone. Shawl, a Messianic Jewish Torah teacher, was not making camping tents, but beautiful four-cornered prayer shawls and prayerfully tying the tallit tzitzit on the four corners. They would have been relatively easy to transport and very desirable among both the dispersed Jewish communities in which he taught and those coming to faith in Messiah and obedience to the Torah. The saints could have given him many times their value if they wanted to help him in his ministry. It cost Shawl his entire life to get the gospel out to some of these far-flung communities, and those who received the good news of the Messiah shared with him in return. In the city of Philippi, Shawl sought out a Jewish woman named Lydia who was a seller of purple, or tallit. He met her down by the river on Shabbat, where she regularly joined with others for prayer. Shawl shared the good news concerning the Messiah, and Lydia's entire household was mikvahed, or baptized there in the river. When Shawl left later that week, I'm certain that he departed with enough tallit to dye quite a bit of thread with which to adorn his specialty tallits. Even after the destruction of Jerusalem, Rome found it difficult to stop the Jews from finding these snails and dyeing their tzitzit. A family from the tribe of Zebulun, notorious for their production of tallit dye, was slaughtered for their flagrant disregard of Rome's purple law. Tradition suggests that the actual dyeing process was lost, but the cessation of using tallit could have resulted from the terror of Rome causing the Jewish population to temporarily submit to their demands so that they could live to fight another day. After the Jews relented and began wearing their tzitzit without the blue thread, the shellfish from which the tallit dye was extracted seemed to vanish from the face of the earth. If Rome forbade the sons of Israel to have this dye to keep the commandment of the tzitzit, it appears that the Almighty forbade the Romans to have it for their luxury. Shortly after Israel returned to the land in the middle of the 20th century, the Hillozone snail returned to the shores of the Mediterranean Sea in abundance.